Hello, friends, and now we begin Book 3 of Tale of Despereaux. It's entitled Gore, the Tale of Midgery Sal. And let me remind you that gore is called an interjection. Just like Furlow said, cripes. It's gore is kind of like a, oh gosh, or like Homer Simpson's, no, it's the same thing. So you'll hear that a lot. Midgery Sal is one of those names that I always say wrong. It's technically Miggery Sal, and her nickname is Mig, but I can't stop calling her Midgery, and I can't stop calling her Midge. So you'll just have to forgive me. All right, we're on chapter 24, a handful of cigarettes, a red tablecloth, and a hen. Again, reader, we must go backward before we can go forward. With that said, here begins a short history of the life and times of Midgery Sal, a girl born into this world many years before the mouse Despereaux and the rat Chiaroscuro. A girl born far from the castle, a girl named for her father's favorite prize-winning pig. This girl was named after a pig. In fact, the word Sal, Midgery is her first name, Sal is her middle name. Sal is the term we use for a female pig. Much in the same way a female deer would be a doe and the male is a buck. A female pig is called a sow. How would you like that to be your name? Me neither. Midgery Sal was 6 years old when her mother, holding on to Midge's hand and staring directly into Midge's eyes, died. "Ma," said Midge, "Ma, couldn't you stay here with me?" "Oh," said her mother, "who is that? Who is holding my hand?" "Well, it's me, Ma, Midgery Sal." "Oh, child, let me go." "But I want you to stay here," said Midge, wiping first at her runny nose and then at her runny eyes. "You want," said her mother. "Yes," said Midge, "I want." "Oh, child, and what does it matter what you are wanting?" said her mother. She squeezed Midge's hand once, twice, and then she died, leaving Midge alone with her father, who on market day in spring soon after his wife's death sold his daughter into service for a handful of cigarettes, a red tablecloth, and a hen. Does that story sound familiar? You are exactly right. Midge is the daughter of the prisoner in the dungeon. Worlds are starting to collide, guys. "Papa," said Midge when her father was walking away from her with the hen in his arms, a cigarette in his mouth, and the red tablecloth draped across his shoulders like a cape. "Go on, Midge," he said. "You belong to that man now." "But I don't want to, Papa," she said. "I want to go with you." She took hold of the red tablecloth and tugged on it. "Lord, child," her father said, "and who is asking you what you want? Go on now." He untangled her fingers from the cloth and turned her in the direction of the man who had bought her. Midge watched her father walk away, the red tablecloth billowing out behind him. He left his daughter, and reader, as you already know, he did not look back, not even once. Can you imagine it? Can you imagine your father selling you for a tablecloth, a hen, and a handful of cigarettes? Close your eyes, please, and consider it for a moment. Done? I hope that the hair on the back of your neck stood up as you thought of Midge's fate and how it would be if it were your own. Poor Midge, what will become of her? You must, frightened though you may be, read on and see for yourself. Reader, it is your duty. Chapter 25, A Vicious Circle. Midgery Sal called the man who purchased her Uncle, as he said she must. And also, as he said she must, Midge tended Uncle's sheep and cooked Uncle's food and scrubbed Uncle's kettle. She did all of this without a word of thanks or praise from the man himself. She was basically his maid, and she was just a child. Another unfortunate fact of life with Uncle was that he very much liked giving Midge what he referred to as a good clout to the ear. A clout, my friends, is a punch, is a hit. Do you remember me showing you the photographs of cauliflower ear? Now I think you know why. In fairness to Uncle, it must be reported that he always did inquire or ask whether or not Midge was interested in receiving a clout. Their daily exchanges went something like this. Uncle: I thought I told you to clean the kettle. Midge: I cleaned it, Uncle. I cleaned it good. Uncle: it's filthy, and you'll have to be punished, won't you? Midge: Good, Uncle. I cleaned the kettle. Uncle: Are you saying I'm a liar, girl? Midge: No, Uncle. Uncle: Do you want me to give you a good clout to the ear, then? Midge: No, thank you, Uncle. I don't. Alas, Uncle seemed to be as entirely unconcerned with what Midge wanted as her mother and father had been. The discussed clout to the ear was always delivered. Delivered, I am afraid, with a great deal of enthusiasm on her uncle's part, and received with absolutely no enthusiasm at all on the part of Midge. Meaning, Uncle loved, was excited, enjoyed hitting Midge in her ears. But I'll tell you this, that we're not in here right now. Not today. Sorry for the interruption. It means that Uncle very much liked hitting Midge, and Midge very much disliked it. These clouts were alarmingly frequent, and Uncle was scrupulously fair in paying attention to both the right and the left side of Midgery's sow. So it was that after time the young Midge's ears came to resemble not so much ears as pieces of cauliflower stuck to either side of her head. And they became about as useful to her as pieces of cauliflower. That is to say that they all but ceased their functioning as ears. Words for Midge lost their sharp edges, and then they lost their edges altogether and became blurry, blankety things that she had a great deal of trouble making any sense out of at all. In other words, readers, Uncle had hit her so many times in her ears and damaged them so badly that she was going deaf. The less Midge heard, the less she understood. The less she understood, the more things she did wrong. And the more things she did wrong, the more clouts to the ear she received and the less she heard. This is what's known as a vicious circle. And Midgery Sow was right in the center of it. Which is not, reader, where anyone would want to be. But then, as you know, what Midgery Sow wanted had never been much of a concern to anyone. How sad. Chapter 26, Royalty. When Midge turned 7 years old, there was no cake, no celebration, no singing, no present, no acknowledgement of her birthday at all other than Midge saying, "Uncle, today I'm 7 years old." Can you believe that she would have been sold when she was 6? 5 or 6? Kindergarten, first grade. She's already somebody's maid. And Uncle, after she said, "Uncle, I'm 7 years old today." And Uncle saying in return, "Did I ask you how old you were today? Get out of my face before I give you a good clout to your ear." A few hours after receiving her birthday clout to her ear, Midge was out in the field with Uncle's sheep when she saw something glittering and glowing on the horizon. She thought for a moment that it was the sun, but she turned and saw that the sun was in the west, where it should be, sinking to join the earth. This thing that shone so brightly was something else. Midge stood in the field and shaded her eyes with her left hand and watched the brilliant light draw closer and closer and closer until it revealed itself to be King Philip and his queen Rosemary, and their daughter, the young Princess P. Now remember, we've gone back in time. This is before Despereaux was born, before even Chiaroscuro was born. All right, so we're way back in time, and in fact, it's obviously before Queen Rosemary died from fright when Roscuro landed in her bowl of soup. The royal family was surrounded by knights in shining armor and horses in shining armor, and atop each member of the royal family's head there was a golden crown, and they were all, the king, the queen, and the princess, dressed in robes decorated with jewels and sequins that glittered and glowed and captured the light of the setting sun and reflected it back. "Gore!" breathed Midge. The Princess P was riding on a white horse that picked up its legs very high and set them down very daintily. The P saw Midge standing and staring, and she raised her hand to her. "Hello!" the Princess P called out merrily. "Hello!" And she waved her hand again. Midge did not wave back. Instead, she stood and watched, open-mouthed, as the perfect, beautiful family passed by. "Papa," called the princess to the king, "what is wrong with the girl? She would not wave at me." "Never mind," said the king. "It is of no consequence, my dear." "But I am a princess, and I waved to her. She should wave back." Midge, for her part, continued to stare, looking at the royal family had awakened some deep and slumbering need in her. It was as if a small candle had been lit in her interior, on her inside, and sparked to life by the brilliance of the king and the queen and the princess. So much like Despereaux, much like Roscuro, light has entered her body and ignited a fire. Do you think, friends, that this is something that will draw the three of them together? Do you remember the conclusion of the last book where Midgery Sow arrives at the castle? And it says that she will, without actually knowing, participate in Roscuro's revenge. And we already know by the end of that other first book, or by the first book, that Roscuro and Despereaux will meet. It's all happening. Let's see. For the first time in her life, reader, Midge hoped. And hope is like love. It's ridiculous and wonderful and a powerful thing. Midge tried to name this strange emotion. She put a hand up to touch one of her aching ears, and she realized the feeling she was experiencing. The hope blooming inside of her felt exactly the opposite of a good clout. She smiled and took her hand away from her ear, and she waved to the princess. "Today is my birthday," Midge called out. But the king and the queen and the princess were now too far away to hear. "Today," shouted Midge, "I am 7 years old." Chapter 27, A Wish. That night, in the small, dark hut that she shared with Uncle and the sheep, Midge tried to speak of what she had seen. "Uncle," she said. "Eh?" "I saw some human stars today." "How's that?" "I saw them all glittering and glowing, and there was a little princess wearing her own crown and riding on a little white tippy-toed horse." "What are you going on about?" said the uncle. "I saw a king and a queen and a itty-bitty princess," shouted Midge. "So?" shouted the uncle back. "I would like," said Midge shyly. "I wish to be one of them princesses." "Ha!" laughed Uncle. "Ah! An ugly, dumb thing like you! You ain't even worth the enormous lot I paid for you. Don't you know that I wish every night I had back that good hen and that red tablecloth in place of you?" He did not wait for Midge to guess the answer to his question. "I do," he said. "I wish it every night. That tablecloth was like the color of blood, and that hen could lay eggs like nobody's business." "I want to be a princess," said Midge. "I want to wear a crown." "A crown?" Uncle laughed. She wants to wear a crown. He laughed harder. He took an empty kettle and put it atop his head. Look at me, he said. I'm a king. See my crown? I'm a king just like I always wanted to be. I'm a king because I want to be. He danced around the hut with the kettle on his head. He laughed until he cried. And then he stopped dancing and took the kettle from his head and looked at Midge and said, Do you want a good clout to your ear for saying such nonsense? No, thank you, Uncle, said Midge. But she got one anyway. Look here, said Uncle after the clout had been delivered. We'll hear no more talk of princesses. Besides, who ever asked you what you want in this world, girl? The answer to that question, reader, as you well know, was absolutely no one. What a sad, sad existence. We'll pick up on chapter 28 tomorrow.